Hey guys, this is Professor Pew Pew, and in today's video, we're gonna talk about some bloodletter builds. So this guide, I would say it's a mid to high level guide. New players might or might not be able to benefit so much from it. It's not that you won't learn anything, it's just that you won't have access to the build that I'm about to show off. So there are actually three versions of this build that I'm talking about, and you can see one of them in my equipment right there. So it's Bloodletter, Torch, Purity Cow, Armor of Valor, and any kind of sandals for Mana Sprint. This is the plate version. There's also the leather version with Mistwalker jacket, and the cloth version with a Fey robe. For passives, it's just first passive everything, and for food, use eel stew and omelets. These builds are not only expensive, but also they only work well at higher IP because the scaling on your W. Your W is going to be dash, so most weapons have only damage scaling or CC scaling, but for the Bloodletter, your dash W has cooldown reduction scaling, right? So you have a lot more mobility if you're using this build at higher IP than lower IP, and also the damage buff uptime on your dash will be significantly longer since your cooldowns will be shorter. So these builds are definitely off meta, not a lot of people running them, but they're pretty effective if you learn how to play them, and as you can see through these chests, I've been making a lot of silver with them. So let's start talking about the builds. We're going to start with the cloth version or the Pharaoh version, because this is the first version that I played. The Pharaoh build is very similar to the same double-bladed build or the same Avalonian glove build that I talked about before in my other videos. Basically, you want to start the fight by poking them with your Avalonian laser beam, and when they get close, you E away from them, make sure the damage part of your E hits, and if they hard to chase, you keep them off of yourself with a fire ring, right? So all of these skills will help you both keep distance and do damage, and make sure in between your E's, you you make sure you want to space out the cooldowns of your E and your laser beam, right? So you use your laser beam to keep them in combat, and that way they can't reset the fight. And basically, you just keep poking them until they're low enough for you to all in with your rope 2 skill or your rope 3 skill if they get that low. This version of the build also works pretty well against the Stalker jacket meta because the rope 2 skill can perma-stun them when they use their jacket. So it's just like the Pharaoh dagger build that I've shown in other videos and the Pharaoh blazing build that other people play. So if they don't use their jacket, you basically treat them like a normal brawl build, and you just want to keep them in combat by hitting lasers and by hitting E's. And if they ever use their jacket, then you just turn on your static shield and you perma-stun them until they die. Sometimes they will just not use their chest piece, or sometimes they'll try to be smart and switch to Inferno Shield instead of Stalker Jacket. If they do that, just play it like a normal melee matchup, as if it's a Battle Axe or something. Right? So kite them with your Fire Ring, and you'll still be able to kill them that way. So this build is really strong against most melee matchups, but it's kind of on the weak side when it comes to facing kite builds. So bottom bows and Showhows are really difficult with this build because you are in cloth, and if you get hit by one of their E's, they just chunk you, right? And because you're in cloth, you can't really face tank a lot of damage when they're trying to kite you. So it does make things kind of rough. And if you want to say, you're just not gonna ever fight against a bottom bow or Chillhow, that's totally fair. It's kind of a difficult matchup, So if you want to just avoid them, that's all right. If you do take these matchups though, just make sure that you don't overcommit and make sure you have a way to get away from them if your engage fails. It is possible to kill them if you can dodge their big E skills. So if you dodge your bottom bow E or if you dodge your Chillhow E, sometimes you can just one push them because kite builds tend to be on the squishier side too, especially the Chillhow players. Sometimes they run cloth, right? So if they mess up their E, you can mess them up too. When you're playing against melee builds that can win brawl against you, which by the way is like 90% of melee builds, right? So when you're playing against them, make sure you check their build to see if there's something that they can cross firewalls with, right? Because firewall is a huge part of how you kite against them, right? So if you have, or if you're facing somebody with, let's say, a Shadow Edge or a Mistwalker Jacket, or in this case, a Gig Potion, make sure you are checking their cooldowns on those skills that can cross firewalls, and just play around those cooldowns. So this guy, this is actually the second time I fought him. The first time he almost killed me. I had to get away from the fight with my cape, and this is the second time. Right, so second time I knew he had a gig pot now, and I was able to kite him out with it. But the first time he almost got me because I didn't check. Alright, moving on now to the Mistwalker Jacket version of the build. So the Mistwalker Jacket version, in my opinion, is the best version. Mistwalker Jacket is just a really useful chess piece against a lot of things. And the way you play this build, if you're fighting something that you cannot brawl against, like for example a battle axe, then you play it the same way as you play the Pharaoh build. You just hit laser, hit E, keep them in combat, get their HP low, and then go all in when they're already low health. But being in leather, you will be able to take more face-to-face brawls than you would be able to if you were in cloth. And we're going to talk about that specifically in the carving sword matchup. So carving sword is something that in the Pharaoh version, you don't really want to brawl against that. But in the Mistwalker Jacket, you can just swap to Chain Slash and brawl against them. When you're fighting against something like a Battle Axe, though, you still can't win that fight. So we're still gonna stick to the hit and run. The hit and run part is gonna be a little harder to pull off because you don't have a firing anymore to keep people off of you. But with the Mistwalker Jacket, if they ever pop a big cooldown, let's say their boots or their Infernal Shield, or let's say a Merc Jacket or something to go on you, you can just time it out with their jacket, and it's almost as good as the firing. It's not quite as good because firing actually keeps them off of you, whereas with Mistwalker Jacket, you just time out their cooldown, and then afterwards they'll still be on top of you. But what the Mistwalker Jacket does allow you to do is, since it's a complete invulnerability, you can face things like Curse much more easily without having to swap to Shadow Edge, and you can dodge things like Showhow E much more easily, because you can just press R and not get hit by the Showhow E. That way you don't have to like hold your mobility skills to get out of them. You can just use your mobility to stay on top of them and just hit R to get out of their E. The Mistwalker Jacket does allow you to take certain fights that you wouldn't be able to take before. So for example, carving swords, you have to hit and run and kite it out before. But now with Mistwalker Jacket, being leather, being less susceptible to being just like one-shotted, you can actually just fight it out with carving swords. And also being in leather, being more tanky, more defensive, it's much easier to survive ratting, right? Because if you are in cloth and a rat comes on top of you, it's very easy for them to execute you before the undead cape pops. Whereas with Mistwalker Jacket, sometimes the low gear rats just don't have enough damage to kill you through the undead cape. So Mistwalker Jacket is much safer uh, compares to the Pharaoh version. So this rat does manage to get away from me, but I was able to reset my HP and get the loot and not die to the rat. Alright, so we mentioned Showhow a little bit already, but Showhow is a fight that I really don't like taking just because they're really annoying to fight against. But when you're fighting against them, just make sure you don't get hit by the damage on their E, and you should be able to win all the Q auto traits. Sometimes they make it really hard for you to dodge their E because they can use their blink to stun you, which makes it impossible for you to like hit a button before their E hits. So if that happens, you could just reset the fight, right? But when you're fighting against Showhow, make sure you save your Purity Cow for their Cultist Robe so they can't heal. And besides that, just don't get hit by E's, and you should be able to outdamage them. Now this one did get a little awkward because he did manage to block the damage of my first E, the execute damage, but as long as he gets hit by it, even if it does 0 damage, it still get a cooldown, so we still win this one. So when a lot of people look at this build, they're not convinced by it because they just don't see where the damage is. And it's true that bloodletters are very low damage, but as long as you stick to the hit and run, the damage will sink in slowly as long as you avoid taking any damage yourself. However, against certain builds, it is possible to just straight up face-to-face outbrawl them. Like in this case, we're fighting against the Mistwalker Jacket Carving Sword. That build is pretty meta and it's very easy to outbrawl if you swap to Chain Slash. With Chain Slash, it's very difficult for the Carving Sword to land their skills on you because you're jumping all over the place, so Splitting Slash is going to miss a lot. And Chain Slash also allows you, it's iframe, so if you can predict when they're gonna E, you can also just dodge their E damage with it, which is really strong, right? So this way you can actually just win face-to-face brawls against carving swords. Now, in this matchup, in this fight, the carving sword was about to pop his cape on the mob, so I got a little flustered and I hit my W a little bit early there. Should have waited a little bit maybe and see if I can hit a E to just execute, even if he pops cape. But we missed out on the first fight, but he is going to give us a second fight, and we're going to demonstrate this point again in the second fight. Okay, so here's the second fight, and he changed things up a little bit for the second fight. He swapped over from healing potion to gig potion. He's probably thinking that in the first fight we just face to face outbrawled him. Maybe switching to gig potion then would help with the brawling. But gig potion is really not good against anything that has a Mistwalker jacket because they can just time out your potion. You don't get any value out of it, right? So there he potions, and then I just sit it out with the Mistwalker jacket. And also, you saw at the start of the fight, he used E to gap close and not to actually do damage to me. So that was probably not the best way he could have done this. But even if he had held his E to try to actually hit us with it, we can still avoid the damage on his E if we manage to predict his E and just dodge it with a Chain Slash iframe. We can also do a better job at dodging his W, right? So if we can dodge either one of those skills, that'll be huge for us. And given how many dashes we have in our kit, it's pretty easy to do that. Armor of Valor also works pretty well against Stalker Jackets. You do trade positive against them for a short duration. Stalker Jacket lasts for longer, right? Stalker Jacket lasts for, I believe, 6.5 seconds or something like that. Whereas the Armor of Valor only lasts for 2 seconds. So ideally, you only want to tank for 2 seconds, and then after that, you want to dash out of their AoE with one of your many dashes. And then just wait out the duration of their Stalker jacket. If you can't do that, like if you can't keep them off of you, and you have to brawl with them, then keep in mind that your dash ability, your W, is a damage buff. It's not just for movement, you use it for damage as well, right? So keep in mind that when you're auto attacking and queuing, the damage buff from your W is going to help you a lot in winning these Q auto fights. The stats on the plate armor are just really strong for brawling. In this matchup, this is against Sadie cats, by the way. Right, so in this carving matchup, you see I'm getting hit by a lot of his skills, but I'm still winning the brawl by basically just face rolling with chain slash switch, right? Now this fight does take 2 parts. Unfortunately, in the first part, he does manage to get away. I was trying to chain slash to some mobs to catch up to him, but yeah, you'll see right here the it kind of worked against me there. So he gets to reset this fight here. Um, I was going to try to just chase with Q, but you see he's gonna. If I can hit this laser here, I could have just kept chasing actually, but he's gonna do a cabbage soup into a Mistwalker jacket dodge there, right? So now he's actually in the lead, but I did manage to dodge that W there, so I decided to just go all in, and we're actually we actually started out with a really big disadvantage. We were not full health yet, and because my laser hat was on cooldown, right? So I wasn't able to like zap him at the start either. But I do have my undead cape, and he doesn't at this point, right? So if he kept hitting me, I would have been able to just cape out, right? So that's why he broke off there to basically wait for his EEW to come back so he can kill me through cape. And he also has a pot going right now, right? So okay, he kept hitting me in cape, right? So now I pop my cape, and now we have to reset, and we go for round 3. But as you can see, even with a bit of a disadvantage at the start, with helmet on cooldown and missing a bar of health, we still did pretty well in basically just a face-to-face fight, right? This is just, the power of plate armor in brawling. Alright, so this is the third fight now, and this time he's gonna engage really hard on me because he doesn't want me to, build a health lead with the helmet, right? So if I hit him with the helmet, then it'll be on cooldown for a while, and he doesn't want me to like wait for it to come halfway off cooldown and then start rolling, right? And also this time he swapped over to Infernal Shield, which is a better choice for him because Mistwalker Jacket can't really avoid a whole lot against the Bloodletter. We don't really have any like big bursts for them to avoid, right? So this time he engaged really hard, but he still lost the fight even with the Inferno Shield swapped because we were able to dodge his W twice during the fight, and then once again here, it's coming up, but when I'm gonna dodge his W again here, right here, while I'm chasing him. So you can see here the chain slash working just really well against the carving sword. It makes it a lot easier for you to not get hit by their Ws, and sometimes you can even use it to iframe their E's, right? So you kind of just have to guess when their skill shots are coming and just avoid all of it with your chain slash and like your Qs. Alright, next up we have a Deathgiver matchup. Now, I have to say that this Deathgiver particularly did some misplays. Like right here, he used both of his healing pot and his Merc jacket right from the start, right? Not really sure why he used them together like that, but he was over healing a bit, and because he burned all of his healing skills right off the start, we know we are stronger now, right? Because his pod right now is on cooldown, and his Merc jacket is on cooldown, so we can just chase him. We can just hard chase him, and what we can learn from this fight though is that Armor of Valor is also really good against Merc jackets because Merc jackets the healing that you get from them are reduced by quite a bit for solo instances, so for corrupted dungeons and for solo mists. So they don't really get the full value out of it, and every time they hit you to proc Merc Jacket, it also proc your Armor of Valor, right? So you can see right now he's trying to heal with Merc Jacket, and he just didn't heal at all. It doesn't really out damage the Merc Jacket, but it prevents any meaningful healing too. And now we have a fight against a Pharaoh but Amethyst build. This is the same build that I talked about in one of my previous videos. Right, so against builds like this, builds that rely on a lot of CC, just keep in mind that you can use Armor of Valor as a CC resist. You do still get stunned, but you don't get your channel cancelled. Right, so if they stun you, you get to silence them back, and that will make their combos a lot less clean, right? And also, um, Arma Valor do proc on dots, right? So in this last usage of Arma Valor, he's getting close to the execute range, right? So I decided to just use Armor of Valor to tick him once to get him closer to the execute range, so that the next laser beam will get him below the execute range, and now I can E him for the extra damage. Right? So when he E's me midair, I'm gonna hit him with my E, and now I'm not, because he's in Undead Cave, I'm not worried about dying to his combo, right? Because Undead Cave has reduced damage. Right now I just have to wait until my E comes back, and we should be able to finish. Or I can zap him out of there like that. Last thing to talk about, unfortunately I don't really have an even IP matchup for this one because Fire Staffs usually don't run very high gear, but Armor of Valor is really good against Fire Staffs. Fire Wall, Fire Q, and Fire Artillery, and even Wallfire E, they all apply separate dots which will proc your Armor of Valor separately, right? So if they hit you with all three, then you're getting three different individual procs of Armor of Valor, and it's just gonna do a whole lot of damage to these cloth targets, and it also keeps them silent so they can keep spamming Q on you. Alright, so to compare the pros and cons of these three builds, I would say Pharaoh is probably the best one into Stalker Jacket, as it has the potential to just like perma-stun and one-shot them. But it is probably the weakest one against kiting builds because anything like bottom bows or Showhows will just chunk you really hard with their E's, and while you're trying to gap close, you'll end up tanking some Q damage, and those Q hits will hurt you a lot more since you're in cloth. Armor of Valor is probably the safest one to play because you're in plate and you're just really hard for people to finish off. But Mistwalker Jacket is probably the most well-rounded one because Mistwalker Jacket is just a good chess piece to have against pretty much everything. Now, I'm sure you've all seen other people play Stalker Jacket with a bloodletter, but personally, I think Stalker Jacket is a really boring item. Like, everybody's trying to play Stalker Jacket with every weapon, basically. So I don't play Stalker Jacket with any weapon, and I hope you don't either, because I just think it's really boring that everybody's using the same chess piece. So anyways, that's it for this video. Like, subscribe, and follow me on Twitch.